At one point, I remember turning to my mother as we were having a conversation about what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I, the honest child that I am, told her, I don't know. All I know is I can't imagine working in an office at a 9 to 5. Eventually, I found myself frustrated in class, so I drew. I drew what I saw around me because there wasn't anything else to do. I was curious about things and I wanted to see if I could capture it on paper. If you drew in class, people would think that you were slacking off, despite the fact that I clearly wasn't. But if you wrote in class, they just thought it was notes. So I started writing my feelings down. I found myself writing these artistic prose that kind of didn't mean anything because I wasn't studying the art of poetry, the art of writing. I got bored in high school. And so I decided I would go to culinary school instead. And I was enamored. I loved cooking food for people. It was incredible. But I had an opportunity that wasn't the university I'd gotten into for cooking. And I decided through a conversation with my mother, if I got into a very prestigious art program, which was the only other thing I could see myself doing, I would do that instead. So I went to art school because I got in, because of those drawings I'd been making. 2 quarters in, I realized I might have a big issue. I hated the program. I won't bore you with classes that I hated and why I hated them. Because as many classes that I hated in this program, I loved in this program. I learned about color. I learned how to see. I learned how to take my craft to the next level. I loved coming into the workshop and working for hours, drawing and going home covered in charcoal and graphite and feeling like, although I didn't know what to do with this skill, I was making something. But it was the lectures. It was the lectures that ultimately drove me away. The boring way that they talked about artists, and we watched these avant-garde pieces that I didn't understand what they, not even what they meant, but what they were doing, what they were trying to say. Why should I care? Make me care. And they couldn't. Go to these lectures and they'd say things like, art, is it supposed to have a why? They'd make us watch hours of performance art, but wouldn't help you conceptualize it, wouldn't help you decide what you felt about it. And I'd fall asleep because these rooms were cold and the subject was boring. And I started to question, do I even like art? So I'm struggling. And we get to the last part before I quit, where I'm in a lecture and it's cold. And we've been there for hours. And in this huge auditorium of students, they start a discussion. And they say, you are not Jeffrey Kuntz. And realistically, most of you have no hopes of ever being Jeffrey Kuntz. You will not be successful. So, you need to be realistic about yourself and about what this program is. We can teach you to be artists, which is why we cared more about your grades than about the talent you came in with. But you have to be willing, as fine artists, to sleep in your parents' basement on a pissy mattress, probably with a second job, struggling and starving for your art. If you are not willing to do that, this probably isn't the program for you. Maybe you're not a real artist. Enraged, I paced the campus, thinking about maybe I should move into another program, a more practical program, like design. I applied, and I did not get in. So I could stay in this program that just told me that I am not good enough to be here. I am not their target audience. And if I'm not willing to starve for my art, then I should just leave. So I did. It was during this period that I had a really bad breakup. I was devastated because I couldn't comprehend why this guy I was in love with, who I was pretty sure was in love with me, couldn't date me. What was wrong? But I hadn't transitioned, and we're in small town Ohio, and nobody talks about those things. So I found my way to the dance club that existed on campus. And I thought, well, I'm already miserable. And I've tried dance before, casually in life, and having opportunities as a kid that didn't feel right. You know, I didn't want to be a ballerina. I wanted to be one of the boys wearing black and white in the back. But if that wasn't available to me, then I didn't want it. That I joined this club. It became a life jacket because I was floating along at university, and my relationship that was so important to me was bringing up things that I didn't know how to process. And really, all I wanted was a hug. And although I didn't find that in Lindy Hop, I did find that in blues. And I became obsessed. Because as much as I was terrified about touching people, I could express my grief and my pain just as much as I could express my joy. I could express my nerves. And there was a challenge to it, because I'm not the most movement inclined naturally. Or at least so I told myself. I'd never really done dance before. And although I had a lot I wanted to say, it was a medium I didn't really know. I went down the path of dance for a really long time, because that's what was working for me. It was the art form that was easiest. It felt like other things were too difficult. Finding the time and the willingness to pick up my pencil again, to pick up graphite again, felt too difficult. And although I was still cooking, I was also falling ill, and that became harder and harder to do. Who wants to cook for no one? I loved dance, and I got into teaching, and I loved that too. And yet I still struggled with a particular aspect as I got deeper and deeper into teaching, which was that I didn't really want to be seen. Being an artist, making stuff, has always been about the stuff you were making. Nobody thinks about the person drawing the drawing. You think about the drawing. You think about the play, not the person playing a part in it. So when I got into teaching it for dance, I kind of subconsciously assumed it would be like that. That I would do performances and compete And people would see me as a competitor, but not necessarily see me, the human behind it. That who I was wasn't really important. What was important was the art that I was making, was the way that I was showing up, was the way that I impacted others. Ironically, I also didn't see myself as an artist. Although I recognized that dance is an art form, I just didn't see myself that way. And as I found myself invested more and more into the art, I of course got invested more and more into what made the art work. Things were going well. I occasionally drew, I occasionally cooked, and I'd started writing along the way, but in a way that had so little expectations of me, because I didn't think anybody was looking at it, nor did I care that much about it. It was a gift, an easy extra thing. If there was typos, well, that doesn't matter. You didn't pay me. You know, it didn't matter if it looked professional. It didn't matter if it was clean, because it was something I was doing as an aside project for my main thing, which was teaching, which ultimately really came back to wanting to make an impact on other people around me. And even though I was struggling, and I tried to get 9-to-5 work, that wasn't working out. I was too sick and not particularly well suited for it. 2020 would be the year that I took dance as an art form more seriously. 2020 was not that year. 2021 was not that year. 2022 was not that year. And at some point I met other people making stuff online. And I quietly confessed that I thought I was a little unhappy with what I was spending my time doing. But I felt a bit trapped, because I didn't really know what else to do, and everything else I tried hadn't been successful. So I began a period of time that I called my artist transition, me not knowing what I'm doing or what I want to do. I was going to Europe, pursuing dance again, trying to see if there was something in here that I didn't understand, if maybe I changed how I was relating to it. Maybe it would feel good again. And to my surprise, it did. I went to Europe feeling underprepared, as I so often do for almost everything that I do. And I was preparing for a lecture that I was giving. And a couple hours beforehand, I was telling a friend that I was feeling really nervous about it. And the first few minutes are painful, as I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that I'm going for. And then it all comes together. And I have this moment while I'm talking. And I look out at these people's faces and the way that they're being affected by the things that I'm telling them. And my comfort in my body as I'm talking and yet performing at the same time. As I'm taking this thing that lives in my head and putting it into the world. That this is what I want to be doing. My trip continues. And I'm off to Seattle. And my classes go well. But I'm nervous about this performance. And it feels like I'm flowing through time. As at some point, I stare up and I see the light. And I can see the silhouette of the crowd. And the hush that's over the room and the hum that exists in the space. And I feel myself filling the space with the things that I'm trying to say. And I think again to myself, this is what I want to be doing. This is it. As an artist, I've always struggled to define myself and to feel like I was an artist. How do you feel an identity that doesn't feel a lot different than breathing or existing? I make stuff because I exist, because I breathe. And for so many years, I made so many things privately for myself. And although it was nice, it didn't feel satisfying. Because for me, for my art, for what I want to make, it requires dialogue and impact on others. Without that, it's just flat somehow. And to me, there's no difference between the writing I do for my personal stuff, the writing I've done for others, the writing I've done for the blog Obsidian Tea, my dance work and my speaking work, my drawing, my painting, and my videos. I have some things to say. And I think I'm the man to say them.